I would like to take a moment and introduce today's speaker, Dinitia. Dinitia Smith. Did I say it right?
Dinitia.
Dinitia. I don't know why I wanted to do that. Is the author of 4 previous novels, most recently The Honeymoon, and her short stories have been published in numerous magazines. For 11 years, she was a reporter at the New York Times, where she wrote on literary topics and intellectual trends. She has won many awards for her writing, including fellowships from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Ingram Merrill Foundation, and the McDowell Colony on the Bread Loaf Writers Conference. And this is another lovely fact. She is also an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. Her film, Passing Quietly Through, was chosen for the New York Film Festival and shown at the Whitney Museum and the Museum of Modern Art. So please welcome Dinitia.
Thank you, Joan.
I'm just going to stop my video.
Okay. Joan, I'm very happy to be here. I am here to talk about my new novel, The Prince. This is my 5th novel. And The Prince is a modern version of Henry James' great novel, The Golden Bowl. That novel takes place, well, basically at the end of the 19th century. And this novel, my novel, takes place in the 21st century. And I borrowed the basic outline of Henry James' novel, but I, made it quite different because it's in our time. Henry James is a very difficult writer. I love his work. I love The Golden Bowl. My novel is really written in plain English, and I don't know how to write like him, although I love what he does. So the novel is the story of a wealthy family with a terrible secret. And it unfolds as the trajectory is as the people in the story become aware of this secret. It's not really stated, but it's a very dangerous secret in a way. What happens is, excuse me, the main character, the father in this family, is a descendant of a robber baron. That means like the Rockefellers or the Carnegies. He has this huge amount of money, and the robber barons were a ruthless group, and people like the Rockefellers of my generation are very aware of the antecedents of their wealth, but they go into public service. A lot of them do honorable things. They become doctors. My guy becomes a public interest lawyer, but he's surrounded by this immense wealth and in some ways protected, although he wants to do good. So he has a daughter who's, to whom he's very close. He's a widower. She's innocent, she's smart, but she too was brought up in a bubble of wealth. And she is engaged to be married to an impoverished Italian prince. Now you may ask, well, what is an impoverished Italian prince? The fact is that there are a lot of not wealthy members of the Italian royalty. Italy doesn't recognize titles the way the UK does. And there are many of these estates, these palazzos that are owned by these families, they're heavily taxed. They're given a certain landmark status. The families support them by giving tours, of various programs. So this guy, the wealth, whatever wealth was in the family, has dissipated. He's a prince, but he wants to, in Rome, he wants to have a Roman hip hop band. He's kind of lost. He doesn't know who he is really. And he gets a job in an Italian bank in New York where he doesn't know anything about finance, but they trot him out when they're trying to get someone to invest in Italian securities. So they say, this is Prince Pavlicino. So anyway, they this guy is engaged to this sweet young American girl. I should add that the Henry James novel takes place in the UK. My novel takes place in New York City and on the private island that the family owns. It's the largest island in Long Island Sound. It's a place of primeval beauty that nobody can go on but family members and servants and occasionally a guest. So it's a metaphor for this family, who still has this kind of innocence that comes from being protected by their wealth. So the problem starts when, and I'm going to just read a tiny little bit. Onto this scene comes the prince's old girlfriend, with whom he had a passionate affair. They couldn't get married because neither had any money. And it happens that this gorgeous woman is also a childhood friend of his bride-to-be. So she comes on the scene, and the affair has ended, but she nonetheless has a huge impact on him. And I'm just going to read two paragraphs. And there she was, standing before him, tall, slender, long-necked, her dark blonde hair pulled back today, her skin luminous in the heat. She wore a sleeveless blue cotton dress, loose-fitting and plain, with a low square neck, which showed her slender arms and legs, and her thin feet and long toes. Unmoving, she looked back at Federico, the prince, her head held high, amused. This was Christina, strong, defended, slightly mocking. Federico, she said, I didn't know you were here. So Federico goes ahead with the marriage, but the novel is also about they have this irresistible passion, but he also loves his wife, and he tries to stay away from her, to ignore her, to push her away, and eventually they resume their affair. So this affair, his wife is kind of, at first doesn't know, but she begins to sense something is wrong. And one of the things I try to do in the novel is describe how people can half know something and not want to know it. And somebody said of Henry James, for Henry James, love is not wanting to know. And but it begins to happen, something happens, she becomes aware of something, and they carry on this affair riven with guilt because he is married and he has now got a child. So she does something very strange, the bride. She encourages her old girlfriend to marry her father, and they get married. It's almost as if she wants to get Christina away from her husband. At the same time, she also doesn't want her father to be lonely anymore, but it's pretty strange. So you have the son-in-law sleeping with his mother-in-law, and the novel follows the growing awareness of this. And again, it's not stated like you're having an affair with my friend. It's this unease, this pain, and the solution to this, their solution, the father and the daughter's solution, is almost monstrous. It's not, they don't kill anybody, they don't, take money away, but they do something. And I guess I won't give the ending away. It's psychologically monstrous. So Joan, do you have any questions for me, or do you want to continue this?
Yes, well, I'm at that point in the story, just so you know, this is such a riveting story.
Thank you.
Emily is the wife, Federico is the husband, and Christina is the mother-in-law. It's a great book. It's so interesting. I hope you all purchase it, which is my next comment. If you are interested in purchasing a book, you could get one at our local bookstore. And if you email Scattered Books, which is our local bookstore, at info at
Mhm.
scatteredbooks.com. They will mail to Dinitia a bookplate, and she could personalize the book for you.
Be happy to
And
do
that's
that.
really a nice thing to do. I know a lot of people like to do that. So I encourage you to email our local bookstore at info@scatteredbooks.com, and you could talk to them about the best way to get a book. Excuse me. And the next thing I want to tell you, I want to show the book for those of you who haven't seen it. There's no glare, I hope. Not too
There
much
is a
in it.
bit of glare. Let me try here. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, but I think it's better than what I did.
It's my
Yeah.
favorite book jacket.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, it's taken from the island, this magical island where this love affair reaches a kind of apex, as they say. And
Certainly has.
yes, they're in
Okay,
trouble.
the next one bit I want to say is if you have a question, there's a chat function at the bottom. And please type in any questions you have. Although I will say I do have a couple of questions.
Good, good.
Actually, the first question is one of mine. I'm going to go through my questions first.
No, please.
I thought this was fascinating just because of the way this book goes. Do you ever dream about one of your characters?
Well, this is a very good question. Actually, what I do is as I'm trying to go to sleep, I'm writing. Dreaming, not really, but I write and I can't sleep in my head. I'm thinking, well, can I move this scene to there? And I'm going over the language. So that happens. I can't remember dreaming about them, but I can tell you when I'm working, it's insomnia. It is really. Yeah.
Did you write this during the pandemic?
Yes, I did. Mostly, yes. In fact, you're quite right. And in a funny way, it was solace for me because, well, writers are used to isolation. Here we have a question. Oh, look how nice.
Yes, from Margot Berger.
Yes.
Obviously she's read the book because or maybe she's just listening to it. The plot is terrific, and she doesn't think it's so far-fetched either.
Well, that was one of the appeals of the book, of Henry James' book, and I believe that the essence of my novel is it's a novel about secrets, and I believe most families or a lot of families have a secret, a crazy uncle or someone who did drugs or somebody who had an affair, and that was fascinating to me. This idea of secrets and how you keep them and what happens when they emerge. So that was what was going on, and we'll see, but I think, I mean, people have said that the plot is rather riveting,
It is.
Yeah, they've said, and I love that because that's the intention. People love stories, and what I like to do is tell a good story. And
so you do. But now that you mentioned that the book is about secrets, which I will tell the audience it is,
yeah.
You named the book The Prince. How come it was The Prince and not Secrets?
Okay, that's a good point.
I'm just going to put it.
Yeah, Secrets. Why I didn't name it that. It had another title called Aspects of Love, which was a discussion, really a description of all the kinds of love. All the time Federico is carrying on this affair, he loves his wife and he loves this other woman, and they can't help themselves. So Aspects of Love, unfortunately, I discovered was the name of an Andrew Lloyd Webber musical. So we were searching for a title, and it seemed to have a sort of irony, The Prince, because we think of the word prince not only meaning royalty, but a man who's totally good. And this is in some ways meditation on what is good and what is moral. And so that's how it came about.
Oh, okay. I was interested because I expected a different novel when I picked up the book.
What did you expect?
I didn't know. I wasn't sure. And then I read the flyleaf, and then I sort of got the whole idea.
Right.
You spoke about Henry James in the beginning,
Yes.
and you talked about his novel, The Golden Bowl. What drew you to this Harry James book as
The
a model
Henry,
for your new book?
well, this is,
And how does your novel differ from his novel?
okay,
Well, you
well,
did say you touched on that before.
well, first of all, I think I was attracted. I've read Henry James novels several times, and I was drawn to the idea of family secrets and how they're solved and the unusual way this novel solves them. And Henry James has his complexity. It draws a veil over these secrets, and underneath there is cruelty and there are lies. My novel is really quite different. First of all, it is set in our century. It's set in the US. I had to fill it out. Henry James doesn't discuss robber barons, although in a funny way, his characters are descended from, or maybe second generation. So I had to figure out and even research what happens in these families. Then I set it in New York City, and where I live, I'm somewhat familiar with the city. These are wealthy people who live on the Upper East Side in a grand mansion, which you can see if you go for walks there. Yeah, and then this island was modeled on an island in Long Island Sound called Gardiner's Island, and it's well known. The families don't resemble each other, but it is I think the largest private island in Long Island Sound, and indeed nobody can go there. So that island does not appear in Henry James. Most of Henry James takes place in large estates in Great Britain. So there's these two elements. There's some scenes in Rome, which Henry James doesn't do. But these are modern characters. Again, the prince, in Italy, in his effort to sort of find himself, he volunteers as a soccer coach for migrant children. In Italy right now, right. There are lots of children or teenagers from North Africa, and the Romans basically hate them. The police go in, they live in abandoned buildings. The police go in and wreck the toilets, and the kids are on the street. So he is not a bad soul. And this is a modern touch. We don't get that in Henry James. The girl, is well educated, which is important. She's intelligent. What the problem is, she lives in a bubble of wealth. But there are, I had to envision what a mansion on the East Side would look like. And I envisioned her as not caring too much about her surroundings. So I envisioned this mansion, which still has Victorian elements, paneling and pilasters. And so,
I want to interrupt. The detail in your, when you describe things was very involved. So if you tend to like that, so you could put yourself in that, you will enjoy that book for that alone.
Well, thank you. I like setting the scene. This comes probably from my background as a filmmaker. I like Dickens used to set a scene and then people would talk. Henry James' whole story is told almost from only inside the characters, from their consciousness. But I love the part I enjoy about writing is the research, setting the scene, finding out what the flora and fauna would be on this island, how the house would look in New York, how these wealthy families survive. They have things like family councils. These councils, they have employees who take care of the houses, the insurance.
The office.
Yeah, a family office.
Called the office.
Yeah, that's right. And they arrange, if you have a medical issue, they'll find a hospital where the family gave donations. They take care of everything for these people. And one of the issues is whether people want them for their money. And what I tried to do is make the characters complex. So the prince is not all bad. he's in the grip of this helpless, almost helpless love for this woman, but he also loves his wife and child and feels terribly guilty. The patriarch of the family is kind of mysterious because you don't quite know what he knows. How can he not know, but I found it, from a literary standpoint, very interesting to try to depict not knowing, beginning to know, not giving it a name. That fascinated me. And to describe the erotic pull here. Henry James, the most erotic thing that happens to him in the novel is a kiss, or happens to the couple. I don't particularly like graphic sex scenes in novels because I don't want them to, they don't do anything to forward the plot. I don't like to see them if they're meant to be part of a plot device. But to convey the eroticism between the attraction is fun as a writer. It's much more interesting than to write a graphic sex scene. And there's this sort of helplessness about this love affair.
Well, what follows, because of you talking about Henry James, why do you think authors go back to the classics for inspiration for modern masterpieces?
That's an excellent question, because it's going on all the time.
Yeah.
You could start with Shakespeare, who got the plot of King Lear from an old English folktale, which in fact the papers that had this folktale, that person got it from somebody else. So then King Lear came, and then you have James Smiley, who wrote 1,000 Acres, which is a modern version of the King Lear. Why does that happen? Recently, just let me mention, Pat Barker wrote a book called The Voices of the Girls, which is about the women in the Iliad. And so it's happening a lot. I'll tell you why I think it's happening. Because it's been said that there are really only 4 stories. And somebody else said there are 7, but there's the great man falling from grace because of his character flaws. There's forbidden love between 2 groups, as in West Side Story. There are these basic stories. So writers look for inspiration and a way to tell these basic stories over and over again. Jean Rhys's novel, The Wild Sargasso Sea, is a retelling of Jane Eyre. And one of my favorite books is a book by the poet Anne Carson, which is really a novel in verse. And it's called, it's a retelling of the Hercules myth, and it's told in verse. So it's, this is going on all over.
Yeah.
Well, the autobiography of Red, it's good.
What does your book say about the marriage and relationship that perhaps Henry James could not say in his day?
Very smart, because first of all, I had more freedom to describe the longing, this longing that he can't help. I could be clearer about it. I could be a little more deeper. I don't want to in any way say he's not deep, but I was interested in exploring this matter of inherited wealth.
Right, you did. Right.
Yeah.
Quite well.
And James just takes it as it is. Most of his characters, a lot of them are Americans in Europe, wealthy Americans. And during the robber baron period, the daughters of these robber barons married into the aristocracy. And they provided funds for these impoverished families, and in return, they got the cachet of a title. So in my novel, I went much deeper into what this wealth means, its origins. I talked about this West Virginia town, where a mining town, which was basically owned by this family. and when mining went down, and also they sold the mines to the Japanese, who closed them, and the town is totally impoverished. Now, that wasn't present in James. There's an implication that he was a robber baron, but it doesn't, he's not, he's not said to be brutal. And of course, my hero is ashamed. But I thought that through. It's a more modern subject, more contemporary than James. And I gave a background to it, what the meaning of this money is for the family. And James just takes it as a given that people have this money. And I took it, I wanted to dig into that,
And you did.
Yeah, I wanted to.
You used the derivation of the money and your description of the town.
Yeah.
I still remember the pregnant young girl, teenager.
That's right. And if you go to West Virginia, which I have been, the poverty is staggering. I've seen poverty as a journalist.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
This is just, you see girls wearing pajama bottoms and t-shirts, pushing a stroller.
Young girls, teenagers.
Yeah, you see teenagers, and all the storefronts are closed. And this is what happens when these big companies pull out, when they exhaust the resources of the mines, when another aspect of it is when it was cheaper to buy from abroad than to manufacture. So that's completely invented. I was interested in the origins of this wealth.
Yeah, I mean, all that is explained. So you really get what's going on there.
Yeah, I think so. And the guilt.
The guilt.
Yeah. And yeah.
I just want to say, talking about feelings, what feelings do you want your audience to be left with after reading the book?
More than anything, I want my readers to enjoy a good story. I don't have a moral purpose. I mean, it's not a fable. It's a story. I want the reader to go on a journey, to travel, as they say.
Oh.
I want the reader to, they'll come away with a sense of the power of forbidden passion, the complexity when you love your wife, but you can't help also loving this other woman. And it's not simply sexual. He loves her. She's very charismatic, and his wife is beautiful in her way. And so, I basically love to take the reader on a journey and let the reader see something they don't know about, or to share something, or identify with the characters in some way. I'm very concerned with rounded characters. Nobody is completely evil. No one is completely good.
So in life. All right, just changing the subjects a little bit.
Yeah.
When you were writing for the New York Times, did you ever envision writing this book or something like it?
I always wanted to write. When I got to the Times, basically my second novel was published while I was at the Times, but I had written it before. And the Times, actually, I had a pretty wonderful job there. I was covering literature and ideas and intellectual trends.
That's Wait, we're losing your sound.
Oh,
okay, you're fine now.
Okay. It was very pressured, even though it wasn't going to Iraq like some of my colleagues did. But all I wanted to do was write novels, even though I cared very much about my job. I really did. And I left when my kids had gotten through college and I had more financial freedom. And I left. I still keep in touch with my friends there. I just gave a talk yesterday by Zoom to a group of Times people, and I knew some of them. But I wanted to tell the story, and also I wanted to go deeper. As a journalist, you can't really. So it was right for me to leave. And since then, well, my first novel was written actually just before I gave birth to my twins. And then the second novel was written while they were very young. And the third novel was basically written before I got to the Times. But to continue, I couldn't write while I was there. I couldn't write fiction. It was impossible. You know, you're on call weekends and it's just, but I'm glad I did it.
Well,
You know,
we are too.
yeah.
We are too. And just to sort of conclude, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat, because this is about the last question I'm going to ask. Well, to another question after that.
Yes, go ahead.
But this is about your films.
Yes.
The films have won many awards, as I said in the very
Yes.
beginning of the program, including an Emmy that we spoke about, and are shown at the New York Film Festival, the Whitney Museum, and the Museum of Modern Art. Please explain how you got into films and what are your films about?
Okay, I'm not sure why. I think I was searching for a means of self-expression. And in a funny way, I was getting away from journalism. When I got out of college, I was a journalist. Films, I also felt at the time that the novel, that film could do more than the novel. And
Really?
Yeah, I thought it could go further. I think I was wrong. When I was making films, there were a lot of problems. I was in a sort of second wave of interest in women filmmakers. There have always been women in film, but I did quite well. But there were certain problems. One, I got pregnant with twins and I couldn't travel. You had to travel. You had to be able to leave and go and film. Secondly, it was very collaborative. You weren't the only voice seeking expression. And thirdly, most of it was in California at that point. Now it's in New York. Now there are a lot of women, but I couldn't look around at that point. And the same was of novelists. You know, I couldn't see women ahead of me who had children, who were raising families. You know, Virginia Woolf and George Eliot, you know, they didn't have children. So it was a kind of identity crisis. And so I went back to journalism, which is what I knew how to do. But I did quite well with film, but you can't travel when you have two babies.
No, that's pretty, twins, especially.
Yeah. Yes.
When one cries, the other starts.
They join.
Doesn't stop. And lastly, do you have any projects that are in the works right now?
I wish I did. I've been very busy publicizing the book. I don't really. I'm nervous about starting again. It's difficult, very, very difficult to write a novel. This was actually the easiest of my novels, and it took a lot of effort. So the answer would be, things are swimming around in my head, but I haven't settled on anything. And
when you mentioned your other novels, how different is The Prince from your other novels?
They're all regrettably in some way totally different. The reason it's regrettable is I'm not identified with a certain kind of fiction like mysteries. Totally different. The first novel was about people organizing in the 70s, you know, radicals, going out to Detroit because that was going to be Petrograd. They were going to organize union, you know, people in the unions. The second novel was somewhat autobiographical. It was about a stepbrother and a stepsister who are separated as children and they come together as adults. That was the most autobiographical. The third one was about a girl who lives as a boy, and she goes to a small town and all the teenage girls fall in love with him, not realizing that it's a girl. And a lot of problems ensue, you know, chaos ensued. And then the one before this was about George Eliot and her marriage to a man 20 years her junior, who was very handsome. They went on a honeymoon and they got to Venice, and he jumped off the balcony of their hotel and told the gondoliers not to rescue him. This is only a couple pages in the biography because not much was known. And I was very interested to try and figure out what could have happened. And I stuck with the known truth there. And from the diaries and the letters, I created what I thought might have happened. So every novel is very different.
They
Partly 'cause
certainly
I like to travel, I like to travel.
Sounds good to me. Sounds very
Okay.
good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all. If there's any other questions?
I see something in chat, but I don't know if
No, that's an old question.
okay.
Okay,
All right.
right? Any
So
questions? I guess not. Well, thank you so much.
it
Do you have
was
anything
great.
you want to say that you want to add to this discussion?
Well, just that I hope readers enjoy the book. I think they will. I hope they go on a journey with the book and
Mhm.
enter into another world. And
Yeah,
that's the
it
best I can
certainly
offer.
is. Certainly is. Well, as again, I said you could purchase the book, and if you wanted it personalized, you could have that too by calling up your local bookstore in Chappaqua, which is Scattered Books, or you can email them at info@scatteredbooks.com. And the owner, Laura, will contact her and we'll have everything personalized and sent to you, because she is mailing the books in case anybody has any worries. So again, thank you so much for coming to the program, and thank you all for attending.
Thank
Hope
you.
to see you at the library, all
Okay.
libraries.
Take care. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.